Welcome to Clue 2 of Shawlography. We're going to continue off of this beautiful shape and see what other textures and color combos we can come up with. There's going to be timestamps linked down below in this video, so if you want to skip ahead to a section or skip ahead to the end of this video to see a spoiler of what the total Clue 2 looks like, that might help you settle down and adjust and plan your color placement. But I'm going to tell you exactly where to place colors in the pattern for Clue 2. And if you want to spice it up by throwing in a 6th or a 7th color pop, that's totally up to you. But use the recommended color placement. We're going to get started with colors A and D. We haven't used colors A and D very much in Clue 1, so let's see more of those colors and see what kind of magic we can make with them. Section 5. We're going to continue working off of the live stitches after those I-cord loops. You should have 189 stitches on your needle, so you could do a little stitch count check. If you don't have 189, sneak in some extra stitches or decrease some extra stitches. It's totally okay to fudge it. So let's begin section 5, row 1 with color A. We're going to work with colors A and D for section 5. Color A is the same color that you cast on, this orange and this color right here. Color D for this section we're going to work with, get that yarn set aside. That's going to be this middle stripe color. It's also going to be the color that you used for wedge 3 of this section. So we're going to use 2 colors, row 1, section 5. Look at the right side of your work. So we're going to begin at the beginning of the right side. Color A, knit 3 and knit 2 stitches together. Now we're going to yarn over twice and then knit 3 stitches together. So these 3 I-cord stitches, we want to knit these together. Ooh, my needles aren't so pointy, so what I'm going to do is pull on the stitches a little bit first to loosen them up. Now I can zoom through those 3 stitches together. Now we're going to knit 1 and pass that knit 3 together stitch over. Just like that. We're going to do that all the way to the last 4 stitches. Yarn over twice, knit 3 together. Oh, there we go. I got through all those 3 stitches the first time. Knit 1, pass that first stitch over. Yarn over twice. So I'm going to do this loose technique where you insert the needle and tug on the stitches. That makes it really easy to knit 3 together. Knit 1, that's that single stitch. Pass, whoopsies. Knit that single stitch and then pass that stitch over. Whoop. I'll just rescue that stitch there. Alrighty, so every time you do that knit 3 together, that's the stitch that you're going to pass over. Yarn over twice. I'm going to show this for you right-handed English throwers. Knit the 3 I-cord stitches together. Knit this single stitch. Pass the stitch over. So what you're going to be seeing is a yarn over twice in the gap between those I-cord loops, and then you'll end up with 1 single stitch coming from those 3 I-cord stitches. So let's do that one more time. Yarn over twice. We need to loosen up these stitches so you can knit 3 together. Knit 1. Pass that stitch over. One more time. Yarn over twice. Knit the 3 I-cord stitches together. Knit that single stitch. And don't forget to pass. There we go. A fun little yarn dance with color A. So continue doing that all the way until you reach the last 4 stitches, and that's the beginning of row 1, right side. I'm at the end of row 1 right side using color A, and there's a single stitch coming from each I-cord loop followed by 2 yarn overs. So you have a single stitch, yarn over twice, a single stitch, yarn over twice. When you reach the last 4 stitches, knit 1 and slip those last 3 stitches with yarn in front. That color A is in front. Turn to work row 2, wrong side. Row 2, knit 2, slip, slip, knit. Slip knitwise, slip knitwise, knit those 2 stitches together through the back loop. Slip, slip, knit. Let me show that one more time. Slip the first stitch knitwise, the second stitch knitwise, knit those 2 together through the back loop for a slip, slip, knit. Now purl 1, knit 1, purl 1 into first yarn over. Knit 1, bring the yarn forward to purl 1, and then you can take that stitch off. Put the yarn in back, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1 into second yarn over. Knit, purl, knit into second yarn over. We have 5 stitches coming from that big yarn over. Bring the yarn forward to purl 1. So we're going to do those instructions all the way to the last 4 stitches. Purl 1, knit, purl into first yarn over. Knit, purl. So make sure you do both of those stitches before taking that first yarn over off. And if your other yarn over accidentally slips off your needle, get it back on there, because we need to knit, purl, knit into that second yarn over. Purl and knit into the second yarn over for 5 stitches coming from that yarn over hole. Purl 1, knit 1, purl 1 into the first yarn over, knit, purl, knit into the second. Always purl that single stitch, and then we need 5 stitches coming from this yarn over hole. Knit, purl into the first yarn over, knit, purl, and knit into the second. Knit. If you accidentally slip that yarn over off, get it onto the needle. We've got to knit 1. Don't forget to purl 1 as well into that first yarn over. Knit, purl, knit into the second yarn over. Purl 1. Keep working row 2, and this little yarn over knit purl dance that we're doing is going to make these big holes in the fabric. Super beautiful. And make your way through row 2. You can do it. Don't give up. Keep working row 2, because after this it gets much easier for section 5. Knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. Purl 1. Keep on going for row 2. At the end of row 2, you reach the last 4 stitches. You can purl 1 and then slip the last 3 stitches with yarn in front. Keep color A attached as you turn to work row 3 right side. You should have 277 stitches at the end of row 2, with 5 stitches coming from each of those big yarn over holes and 1 stitch coming from each I-cord loop. Row 3 right side, we're going to use color D. This is the same color as that middle stripe, color D. It's also the same color as wedge number 3. So use color D, knit 3, Slip one with yarn in back. Slip one purlwise, keeping the yarn in back. Knit 5. I'm going to do the weave in Steven as I knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those are the 5 stitches coming from that big yarn over. Slip one with yarn in back. We're going to repeat that all the way to the last 3 stitches. Knit 5, slip 1, knit 5, slip 1. After you knit 5, slip 1 with the yarn in back. Let's do the next knit 5. I'm going to do that weave in Steven just for a couple more stitches so I don't have to weave in that yarn tail later. All right, that's enough. So knit 5, slip 1. So continue working these rows, rows 3 and 4 with color D. On the wrong side, you're going to slip that same stitch, and we're also going to knit those same 5 stitches on the wrong side. So really easy techniques for rows 3 and 4. Keep both yarns attached, colors A and D, as you work rows 5 through 8. And those rows are really easy, so just carry that yarn along the edge as you stripe colors. So we're going to do 2 rows of each color. Color D, and then color A for 2 rows, color D for 2 rows, working these really beautiful slip stitches. I am reaching the end of row 3, right side. Knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you notice that you don't have 5 stitches in your yarn over, you can always sneak in a stitch if you're missing a stitch by just increasing an extra one. So if you're reaching the end of your row and you're missing a stitch or you have one too many, you can sneak in an increase or decrease. But I just knit 5 and I'm going to slip 1 with the yarn in back. Now I'm at the last 3 stitches. After you slip 1 with yarn in back, bring the yarn forward to slip those last 3 stitches with yarn in front. Row 4, wrong side, knit 3, slip 1 with yarn in front. So we're going to slip that same stitch with yarn in front, and then take the yarn in back to knit 5. Slip 1 with yarn in front. Knit 5. The yarn needs to be in front before you slip, and then take it in back to knit 5. Let's do that one more time. Here's the slip stitch. Slip that stitch with yarn in front. Take it to the back to knit. Knit 5, slip, knit 5, slip, all the way to the last 3 stitches. So we're going to work these beautiful stripes, 2 rows of each color for section 5. Here is the completed section 5 with those beautiful slip stitch columns. You should have 6 total color D stripes, 6 garter ridges. Make sure you still have 277 stitches. We didn't do any increases. So this is what the right edge looks like of section 5, and this is what the left edge looks like of section 5. When you're done with section 5, you just finished that color D, so go ahead and break those 2 strands of yarn, those 2 colors. Section 6, welts. We're going to do a fun texture because those I-cord loops were so much fun. So let's do a different texture and just trust, okay? That's the rule of this section. It might feel a little weird, but just trust. Do exactly what I say. Use color E for section 6. This is going to be the same color that you used for that contrast third color right here. And it's going to be the color that you used in the fourth wedge. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have this beautiful mustardy green. Row 1 of section 6, knit 3. Slip 1 with yarn in back. Knit to the last 4 stitches. As I'm knitting, I'm going to start doing that weave-in Steven with my 2 broken yarn tails. It's always nice to trap those yarn tails whenever you can. Knit to the last 4 stitches. When you reach the last 4 stitches of row 1, here's the last 4 stitches, slip that column with yarn in back, and then slip the last 3 stitches with yarn in front. Turn to work row 2, wrong side, knit 3, slip 1 with yarn in front, and then continue to purl to the last 4 stitches. When you reach the last 4 stitches on row 2, wrong side, leave those 4 stitches on the left needle and turn to work row 3, right side. So from here on out, for the rest of this section 6, we're not going to work those 4 stitches. They're just going to stay on the needle. We're only going to work with the stitches in the middle, between the first stitches and the last 4 stitches. So as you work row 3, we're going to knit all the stitches all the way until you reach the last 4 stitches, and then leave those 4 stitches on the needle, and then turn. So we're only going to be working with the stitches after the first 4 stitches and before the last 4 stitches. So continue working rows 3 and 4, and repeating those 2 rows 3 more times until you have 10 total color E rows. Once you reach the end of section 6, repeating rows 3 and 4, you should have 10 total rows with that color E. So once you finish that last wrong side row, row 4, you can break your yarn, and we're turning around to look at the right side. So this is what it should look like. So you never work those last 4 stitches, the first 4 stitches or the last 4 stitches, when you repeat rows 3s and 4. So that's what it should look like. You left those stitches alone, and the stitches in the middle got really long, 10 rows long. Now looking at the right side, section 7, we're going to begin working section 7 and do this magical welt treatment, followed by some fun triangles. But let's have our color E broken, and now those 4 stitches on your right needle, you can slip those onto your left needle. So row 1, section 7, right side, we're going to work with color C. So color C is the color that was your first wedge contrast color, and color C was also that main color, making those V's. So whatever color you used here, color C, we're going to begin row 1. Knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Knit 1 together with a picked up stitch from the wrong side. So we're going to knit each of these stitches together with a picked up stitch from the wrong side. I'm going to pick up that contrasting color that I see on the wrong side and knit that together. So we're going to do that 5 total times. Knit 1 together with a picked up stitch 5 times. So that was 1. Let's get another picked up stitch. 2. So I'm picking up a stitch from 10 rows below. Number 3. And let's do that 2 more times. So it doesn't really matter exactly which strand you get, as long as it's one of those stitches from 10 rows below. And let's get the next one. There we go. So I just did that 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to do some fanciness. We're going to knit one by knitting into the stitch from 10 rows below. So this technique, we're going to go into the front of the work. So after you do that pickup for 5 stitches, this stitch, we're going to dive into that contrasting column, this orange stitch right here. We're going to knit into the front, pull the yarn through, and then drop that stitch. So this is the fun part. I'm going to pull on all of these strands from that dropped stitch, but it's not going to go anywhere because we knit into that slip stitch column. Okay, let's do that a few more times to make that clear. So after you do that knit into the stitch from 10 rows below, we're going to continue to knit one together with a picked up wrong side stitch from 10 rows below. So whenever it says a picked up wrong side stitch, you're going to dive into the wrong side and knit those together. Get the next wrong side stitch. So we're going to do this 5 times. Number 3. So I was doing that weave in Steven, so it's a little hard for me to see what to pick up. So I'm just going to dive in, and it doesn't really matter what you pick up. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more. There we go. I don't want to cover that stitch for you. Here we go. 5. So once you do that 5 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the next stitch is when you go into the front. And that's when you dive into the front of that slip stitch column. Wrap the yarn around, pull it through. Do you see how I went into that slip stitch column? And then you drop that live stitch above. So much fun, fun and funky texture. I'm going to just pull on those dropped stitches. And then look at that. Look what we're starting to get. So we're starting to get this beautiful welt texture. And this technique is the same as the bubble stitch technique that I use in a lot of my other patterns. So let's do that a couple more times. This is a fancy little technique. So let's dive into the wrong side 5 times. And again, it doesn't really matter exactly which strand you get, as long as you're picking up a strand from 10 rows below. So for this batch, it's easy for me to see this same color that is my welt color. So as long as you get something from 10 rows below, you are okay. Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We need 5 picked up stitches from the wrong side. That makes that little welt. And then after those 5 stitches, dive in and make sure you go into the center of that slip stitch right there. And when you go into the center of that slip stitch, look at that. You can see my yellow stitch coming from the center of my orange slip stitch. That means that stitch is secure. So go ahead and take off that live stitch above it, and we can drop it down. Danger, danger, dropping stitches. Yes, I love it. Okay, we have another welt. All right, I'm going to show that to you one more time. And this is going to be a little bit more clear looking at the wrong side because I don't have that weave in Steven disguising that pickup. So this is going to be a little bit easier. So now I'm going to, oh, here we go. So I'm going to pick up this first contrasting color from 10 rows below. Again, it doesn't really matter exactly which strand you pick up, as long as you're getting something from 10 rows below. 2. There's the next one, number 3. 4. And 5. So take your time, it gets easier as you do it. You're picking up 5 stitches from the wrong side, and then every time you reach that slip stitch column, after you do 5 picked up stitches, dive into the front, into the middle of that slip stitch column. And don't forget to drop that top stitch. Encourage those dropped stitches to fall off out of the fabric. Risky knitting. And look at that, we're just getting some fun texture. Never done that before. It's gonna look amazing. Okay, when you're doing this technique, it's okay to knit tightly. You don't have to knit too loose or too super tight, but you can pull the yarn a little bit tight to make sure you get that nice pucker in the fabric. And don't worry too much about exactly how that looks, because later we can pull on all of these welts and accentuate that protrusion from the fabric. All right, one more time, because this is going to be a new technique for a lot of you. So I'm diving in 10 rows below. We're going to do that 5 times. Don't worry too much about exactly which strand you're getting. If it's hard for you to see your contrast colors, just dive down and pick up a strand, and it's going to be okay. Okay, here I'm picking up a strand. I think I picked up a different color, but it's okay. Here we go. We got 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's always nice to do a little count check. There's that little kind of bubble technique where we dove way down into the front. So after you do that one, after the column, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm ready for another column. Dive into the front. Wrap the yarn around. Pull it through and drop that top stitch. Encourage those drop stitches. It's scary at first, and then it gets really fun. So one more time, picking up 5 stitches along the wrong side. 2. 3. 4. Get that stitch. And 5. There we go. There's the 5 stitches picked up. And let's do that one more time. Dive into that column stitch. Make sure you go into the middle of the column. Make sure that stitch is coming right from the middle, and then you're safe to drop the stitch above. And it's only going to go down to there, so you're not going to lose that stitch. You're going to have this nice dropped stitch, but because you dove into the center of that column, that's going to secure and trap it, so it doesn't go any further than that. So keep working row 1 with this really fun welt texture all the way to the last 4 stitches to make that beautiful 3D technique. I am reaching the end of row 1, right side, and look at those beautiful little welts. I've never done this technique quite like this before. It's a combination of those welts and this kind of knit into the stitch below technique. Very similar to my bubble stitch technique, but it should look like this. If it doesn't look quite as protruded, you can tug on each welt as you work or after you finish this row, and you're going to get these really nice little nuggets. Really beautiful texture. I just finished 5 stitches by knitting into the back from 10 rows below. So remember, after you do 5 stitches picking up from the wrong side, you do that dive down into the front and then drop that stitch above. And then just make sure that as you drop that stitch, it should be the stitch that's coming from that knit column. So I just did that dive into the stitch below. So let's knit into the back of the next 5 stitches. 2, 3, and again, it doesn't matter exactly which strand of yarn you get, as long as you're getting something down here, 10 rows below. So you can just get the same color the first time you see the same color that you're knitting with, or you could get the strand the first time you see that contrast color. But I'm going to get the same color for this little welt. We're going to do that 5 times. And then the next time you dive down into the front, you could also trace. Do you see that slip stitch column, that orange stitch? If you trace that slip stitch column, it should lead you to the next live stitch on your needle. So that's coming from that column. So I know I'm good to go safely into the middle of that slip stitch column. Right there. And let me show you one more time that pickup. You can skip ahead in this video if you want to see the next section, but if this technique is new to you, watch what I'm doing closely, and as long as you get some strand from 10 rows below, you're good to go. 2, 3, ooh, sorry if I was blocking that, and 4, right there. And the last stitch, I'm just going to get any strand of yarn that I see down there for the last time that I do that. So now I'm at the last 4 stitches, and you can knit 1. That's that last slip stitch, knit 1, slip 3 with yarn in front. And that's going to finish row 1 of section 7 to complete those beautiful welts. One technique, if that's tricky for you to pick up stitches along the wrong side, if you want to take a spare circular needle, like an extra needle, and pick up those 5 bumps first, you could pick up 5 bumps and then knit each of those picked up stitches together with your live stitches, if that's easier for you. But I picked them up one at a time as I knit them, and give it some practice. And once you're done, that's the only time we're going to do that in this section. So enjoy that beautiful texture. And row 2, wrong side, we get a break. We're going to knit 3 and then purl to the last 3 stitches. Really easy, row 2, wrong side. Once you finish rows 1 and 2 with color C, you'll have 2 rows of stockinette stitch, just like this. Keep color C attached, because we're going to use that color later for section 7. Row 3 using B. This is the same color that was the main color for section 2. So whatever that main color was for section 2, we're going to use that same color. Try to stick to the same colors so you're on track with your yardage requirements. Row 3 using B. Knit 3, slip 1 with yarn in back, knit 5. As I'm knitting these 5, I'm going to take a couple strands of yarn, a couple of my tails, and do the weave in Steven. Let's weave in some of these ends so we don't have to do it later. Knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, slip 1 with yarn in back, knit 5. Again, if you're holding the yarn in your right hand, we're always going to be knitting the 5 stitches coming on top of the welts, the 5 stitches on top of the welts. And we can do that weave in Steven crisscross as we knit 5. Stitch number 4, And stitch number 5. And that's enough of the weave in Steven for me. There we go. That'll weave in those ends. So whenever you slip one, it's always going to be that column stitch. So on row 3, always knit the 5 stitches on top of the welt. And once you knit those 5 stitches, slip that single stitch coming from the column. This is going to be the beginning of a slip stitch triangle motif. And you've done these slip stitch techniques before in section 3. It's the same slip stitch technique where you're slipping the stitches with yarn in back on the right side. And when you reach the wrong side, you'll slip stitches with yarn in front. So make sure you always slip with yarn in front on the wrong side and with yarn in back for those slip stitches on the right side. And carry colors B and C along the right edge. So next time you're ready to work with the next color, just carry that yarn up the edge and follow section 7 rows. Really easy slip stitches for the triangle motif. Here is the finished section 7 with colors B and C making these 2 triangles. We have this little triangle in stockinette stitch and the other triangle is staggered. So make sure your section 7 looks just like this. And the right edge of your pattern, of your fabric, is going to look just like this. And the left edge is right here. So beautiful triangles. Some of your color palettes may be a little more blended and shadowy, so that's okay. And some of your contrast color palettes will be really graphic, depending on your color choices. But don't worry if your section is a little bit subtle, because we're going to have some other color interactions happening later, like this color pop for section 8. We're going to use color A for section 8, which is the same color that you used for the cast on, this orange for me. If you want to use a different color for section 8, you could use a brand new color if you're feeling inspired by adding a 6th color pop to your color palette. Try to avoid using any of your other colors for section 8 because we don't want to run out of our yardage later. So use color A or a bonus extra color for section 8. And lastly, I see some of you have a lot of mohair. If you want to hold a coordinating color or even a different color of mohair, lace weight mohair together with your color A, you could totally do that for this section. And that would be really fun to add a little mohair fluffy pop to your bobbles. But I'm going to keep things simple with color A on its own. Row 1, section 8. Knit 3 with color A. Make bobble. To make the bobble, we're going to knit, yarn over, knit, yarn over, knit into the same stitch. So you're going to get 5 stitches before taking it off. Slip 5 stitches onto left needle. Knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to do that 4 total times. That was the first time. Slip those 5 stitches onto the left needle and knit those 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Slip 5 onto left needle. Here's number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's do that one more time. Slip 5 and knit 5. 3, 4, 5. Now what you should see is this little I cord, and we're going to turn that into a bobble. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total rows, including that first row that you did with color A. So we're going to pass the second stitch on the right needle over. We're going to do that 4 times. 2, 3, and 4. So we have 1 stitch remaining on your right needle, and that was the make bobble instruction. So everything that I just did was the instructions under make bobble. Now after we make bobble, we're going to slip one with yarn in back, knit one, slip one twice, knit one, slip one. I just did that 2 times, and we're going to make another bobble. I'm going to show the bobble for you right-handed knitters, you English style knitters. Make bobble. The make bobble is always going to be the stitch on top of that single garter ridge. So we're always going to do the make bobble right here, and then right here into this stitch, and right here above that single garter ridge. Make bobble, knit, yarn over, knit, yarn over, and knit, resulting in 5 stitches. So we can take it off once you have 5 A stitches coming from that single stitch. Now let's slip 5, knit 5. We're going to slip 5, knit 5 4 times. Here's the first time. Slip 5 and knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was number 1. Slip 5. Knit 5. This is the second time. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Slip 5, knit 5 for the third time. And when I'm knitting these 5 stitches, I'm just holding my yarn like I normally would. You know, if you knit a little bit tighter, that's okay, but try not to knit too super tight, and you don't have to knit loose, so just don't think about it too much. Knit 5, slip 5. We're going to do that one more time for the 4th final time. We slipped 5, now we're knitting 5. And this is the last time. Once you do that 4 total times, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total rows, including that original knit, yarn over, knit, yarn over, knit. So once you count 5 total rows in color A, all stitches are on your right needle. Pass the second stitch over. Pass that second stitch over. We're going to do that until there's 1 remaining stitch. Beautiful, right there. There's 1 stitch remaining, which means we can slip with yarn in back, knit, slip, knit, slip. Beautiful. And now we're ready to make a bobble. I'm going to show that bobble one more time, but that's all there is to it for this row. So just follow the instructions really closely. Don't knit too tight or too loose, but look, that bobble's popping out, and it's making a really fun party texture to go with our welts and our little I-cord loops. Make a bobble. I'm here at that single garter ridge, that little contrast garter ridge, so I know I'm in the right bobble position. 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1. 5 stitches. Slip, knit 5. 4 total times. Slip. And knit 5. Slip 5 onto left needle, so we're always looking at the right side during this row. This is a little bit different to other bobble techniques. If you're more comfortable doing any other type of bobble technique, that's fine. But I recommend doing it this way because you don't have to turn around and look at the wrong side, right side. We're always looking at the right side of the work. And just keep on slipping and knitting. Ooh, I lost count. How many times did I go? I've got my original row. Got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll do one more. There we go. If you knit 1 row too many or too few, that's totally fine. You know, it doesn't matter too much, as long as you've got a bobble that looks a little bit like this. So I've got 5 total rows now. So I'm ready to pass each stitch over, making that bobble. Slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, ready for the bobble. So we're always going to do that slip, knit, slip for the 5 stitches on top of the triangle, and the bobble always goes on top of that little garter ridge stitch. Knit, yarn over, knit, yarn over, knit. Continue following row 1, making the bobble and doing those slip stitches all the way to the last 3 stitches of the right side. Here is the finished section 8 with all of those beautiful bobbles. This is what the left edge of the shawl looks like. We have a bobble before those last 3 stitches. You should have 46 total bobbles and these nice little slip stitches in between the bobbles with those garter bumps. 46 bobbles. Section 9, short rows. We're going to begin with colors D and E for section 9. I already started working row 1 with color D. So section 9 is going to use these 2 colors, this middle color and this third color from your third section. So whatever that middle contrast color was and that third contrast color right here and here, these are my greens. That's colors D and E. It's also going to be the color that was in the garter ridges. So whatever color, that dark green for me, was in that garter ridge for those columns, we're going to use that color D for section 9. Knit 106 stitches. So I just knit 106 stitches on the right side row for row 1. And when you knit 106 stitches, you should be at bobble number 18. So if you're counting to double check, you should have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. You should just knit that 18th bobble stitch. Turn to work with the wrong side. Row 2, wrong side, slip 1 purlwise, purl 1. Place a stitch marker, place marker onto the right needle, purl to last 3 stitches. So after you slipped the first stitch and you purled 1, you place a marker. So there's going to be a marker after those first 2 stitches on the wrong side. Right there. Purl to last 3 stitches. I just finished row 2, and as you're knitting these rows, if any of your bobbles accidentally pop to the wrong side, you can just pop them forward. So sometimes the stitches move around so much they hide on the wrong side, but I'm looking at all those beautiful bobbles on the front. I just finished row 2 using color E. This is going to be the same color that was your welt color. That beautiful welt color. It's also the same color that was your third contrast color in section 3, right there. So using E, row 3, keep both of these colors attached when we work this section. So we're going to stripe colors D and E along the edge for this section. Using E, knit 3, purl to the marker. Purl all the stitches until you reach the stitch marker. Once you reach the stitch marker with color E, remove marker, turn around to work the wrong side. The yarn is in back on the wrong side for row 4. Slip 1 knitwise. Insert the needle as if to knit and just slip it off. That's all there is to it. So if you're holding the yarn in your right hand, the yarn is in back, slip that first stitch knitwise, knit the next stitch, place the marker in this new position. So the marker is always placed after the first 2 stitches on the wrong side. Knit to last 3 stitches. So we're knitting on the wrong side with color E for row 4. When you reach the end of row 4, wrong side, slip those last 3 stitches with the yarn in front. Row 5, using D. So we're going to carry colors D and E along the edge, and whenever you work the next color, just lift that next color from the wrong side. It doesn't matter exactly how you change colors, but just bring the next color from the wrong side. Row 5, using D, knit to marker. We're knitting. As I'm knitting, knit rows are really good opportunities to do the weave-in Steven. So I'm going to find a couple yarn tails here and grab those yarn tails and wrap them on top of my working yarn after each stitch for about 10 or 12 stitches. And this is going to save me from weaving in those ends later. Knit and cross. We're knitting until we reach the stitch marker. You're always going to knit on the right side with color D. This is my dark green, color D. And you're always going to be purling on the right side with your color E. So for row 5, we're knitting all the way to the marker. Every time you reach the stitch marker, remove the stitch marker, turn to work the wrong side. With color D, we just knitted on the right side, so we're going to slip one purlwise, purl one, place the marker, continue to purl to the last 3 stitches. Those are all of the techniques for this right wedge of section 9. Every time you reach the marker, you're going to be removing it and placing it 2 stitches closer to your edge. So you already see that there's a few short row gaps. Continue to work rows 3 through 6, and then after you work 3 through 6, repeat those 4 rows 24 more times. And we're going to get these beautiful stripes and ridges for the short rows. After you repeat rows 3 through 6 24 more times, your right wedge should look just like this. If you're counting these purl bump ridges, you should count 25 of those purl bump ridges all the way to here. And we're going to do next row with color E, knit 3, purl 1. I just knit 3 with color E, and I purled 1. And then you should be at your stitch marker, and then remove that stitch marker and turn to work the wrong side. And next row, wrong side, we're just going to slip these 4 stitches with the yarn in front. And then after that, you can break both of those yarns. And we're done with the right wedge. So this is what the final right wedge looks like. We just worked those 4 stitches with color E, and then every 2 stitches, there's a gap. So this is what your row should look like for that right wedge. We're going to make an identical wedge for the left wedge. So turn to work the wrong side, and we're going to begin the left wedge, row 1, using color D. This is going to be the same color that you began the right wedge with. So I'm going to use my dark green here. It's that same color D that you used for the right wedge. So using D on the wrong side, look in here, knit 3, and then purl 103 stitches. So purl all the stitches until you purl 103 stitches. I am at the end of row 1, wrong side, and I just purled 103 stitches. Turn around to work the right side, row 2, and to double check, you just did 103 purled stitches. You should be at the 18th bobble, counting from the end of the row here. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. You should have just worked the stitch into that 18th bobble stitch. And now on row 2, right side, slip 1 knitwise. The yarn is in back, so just slip that first stitch knitwise, knit 1, place marker. Place a marker onto the right needle and continue to knit to the last 3 stitches. Row 2, right side, we're knitting to the last 3 stitches. When you reach the end of row 2, right side, slip 3 with yarn in front. Turn to work row 3, wrong side. For row 3, wrong side, we're going to use color E. This is the same color E that we used for the other wedge. Using E, knit 3, and knit to marker. We're going to knit on the wrong side with color E, knitting all the way to that stitch marker. When you knit to the marker on row 3, wrong side, remove that stitch marker, turn to work row 4, right side, slip one purlwise with the yarn in front, purl 1, and then place the stitch marker on the right needle. So we're placing it after those 2 stitches. Continue to purl to the last 3 stitches. For row 4, right side. Then continue to work rows 5 and 6, and you'll be repeating all of these rows, working these 2-row stripes. And remember that you're always turning 2 stitches early, but that stitch marker is really going to help you keep track of things. So follow these rows closely, and you'll be turning 2 stitches earlier each time to make an identical short row wedge. And just pay close attention to the knits and the purls, making sure you get that beautiful texture. And if you accidentally knit instead of purl, or purl instead of knit, it doesn't really matter too much. So just make sure you keep striping your colors, 2 rows each, and you will be just fine for this beautiful short row wedge. Here's the end of section 9 on the left wedge. I just knit 4 stitches on the wrong side. So after you repeat those 4 rows 24 more times, you're going to get this identical wedge shape. And the next row, wrong side, using E, knit 4. That's what I just did with color E. And after you knit 4 with color E, turn to work next row, right side, slip 4 with yarn in front. So I'm going to slip those last 4 E stitches with the yarn in front, and then break both yarns. Break colors E and D. After you finish row 9, it's going to look like this. Those beautiful wedges. And when you stretch the fabric, you're going to get a little bit more visible stripe going on. But I love how reversible these sections are, and they're giving us some length to our shawl shape. So this is the completed section 9, colors E and D, forming those short row wedges, identical on the left and the right. And we have that center panel. We still have some live stitches. So I spread out my stitches onto 2 needles just so I could show you how smooth the shape is getting. So we still have live stitches in the center. We've got our stitches out here. And if the fabric puckers a little bit, or if it's a little bit poochy, don't worry about that. We're going to block this out later really nice. But I love how it's all coming together, and I can't wait to see what we do next for section 10. Well, that was an action-packed Clue 2 with welts and bobbles and those fun short rows that are lengthening the shape. So I can't wait to see what we're going to do next week. We're about halfway there with the sections. It's going to get a bit bigger, but we have to wait till next week. So congratulations if you've made it this far. If you want to share your photos on Ravelry, I linked the Ravelry group down below. You can pop those photos in the spoiler thread. And if you share your photos on Instagram, you can use hashtag ShawlographyMCal for photos on Instagram. And just make sure if you're doing posts on Instagram to share a spoiler alert image as the first image in a multi-story post so that people can still have that sense of mystery as we all knit along. But Clue 3 is coming right around the corner. I can't wait to see what we do next.